I'm going to speak really about an issue that you've heard a little bit about through the day, because it is impossible in this world to not be affected by what's happening outside our region as well. So I've been asked to speak about the impact of the war in Europe on South Asia. Just before this, we were at lunch at a session which is one of the most difficult ideas, rediscovering South Asian identities. Because the truth is, as a journalist, and I speak only as a journalist, I've had the privilege of visiting each of the SAARC countries, the 8 SAARC countries as they're known, and I'm always sort of very surprised when I see how much we actually have in common and how little we actually do in common with each other. So this is a little bit about what I hope to speak about before you. It is a speed talk. So I would like to start by saying not only do we need to speed up, but South Asia really needs to speed up. While we have watched, and we all know that the birth of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, really came from an idea in Bangladesh. While we have watched since the 1980s, the rest of the world has found ways to deal with their own regions. And as the war in Europe brings out more and more of an impact on the region, I think we will be forced to work more closely together. So I'll start by talking about how the war in Ukraine has really affected South Asia as a whole, even though we are dealing with it in our separate silos. It's in its 9th month now, and remember, the war in Ukraine, Russia's aggression in Ukraine, came on the backs of perhaps 3 major crises. Each of these crises, if you look at them, actually had an impact, and perhaps the biggest impact on South Asia as one of the most vulnerable places. The first was COVID, felt across the region. In the first wave, I think most of us in South Asia didn't actually get hit, and there was a sense that we all were going to be immune to it. But over time, we saw the impact not only on health, not only on the kind of deaths we saw in South Asia, but also on the loss of jobs, the loss of revenues, the drop in GDP between 1% and 10%. The second really was the issue of global recession, and that's now hitting every part of the region. The impact of this on South Asia's poor will be much more as we see it go, because the impact of the global recession is what? We're seeing protectionism even in countries like the US, which is now looking to move their manufacturing back home. We saw the closing of borders during COVID, which is now continuing, and more and more of a resistance, if you like, to immigrants and people coming in. The rupturing of supply chains, countries saying, I will not necessarily continue with my supplies just in order to take care of my own populations. And the third big crisis, I think, and we've heard so much about it this week, comes from the climate change crisis. I think the Pakistan floods we saw this year, the worst in decades, were just the latest reminder of the kind of dire peril this region lives in. And why do I say that? I don't think most people understand just how much parts of South Asia are vulnerable. When it comes to the vulnerability index, actually South Asia is in the bottom 10% of the world. 20 of 23 cyclones or large cyclone disasters in the past have occurred just in the Bay of Bengal region. Global warming, coastal degradation, soil salinity, water scarcities, all things we're dealing with on a daily basis. And they cause not only the deaths of thousands in South Asia, but I think if we go with this business as usual approach, as they call to emissions, BAU, we will see that by 2050, and these are World Bank figures, nearly 63 million climate migrants will be created in South Asia. So on the backs of all of this doom and disaster that I've just spelt out comes the Ukraine crisis. Interestingly, South Asia's reaction to the war in Ukraine has been strangely unified. If you look at the United Nations, for example, at the UNGA votes, we have seen vote upon vote where most of the countries in South Asia, if not all, on some of them, have abstained. They want to stay out of whatever is the outcome of this. If you look at their statements, the statements are always about dialogue and diplomacy. It's interesting that South Asia in particular, where dialogue and diplomacy is not really the way people are finding out of their current conflicts. But South Asia's response to the Ukraine crisis has been very much that we must find a way to talk. And the worries that each of us have articulated on food, fuel, fertilizer security in the wake of both the war and then sanctions by the US and the European Union. So these are all commonalities in our approach to the war in Ukraine. But where exactly is South Asia going to be hit the hardest? And I'm afraid that we don't really think about these in, as I said, a South Asian context. We tend to think of them as how's my country going to be affected. But more and more, first, energy security. As fuel prices soar, the US has, of course, shut down its exports. Europe is diversifying to renewable energies, also much more to the Middle East, West Asian oil resources in Saudi Arabia and Iraq. South Asia will either be starved of these resources over time or they will become extremely expensive. Obviously, for the moment, most countries are looking to those Russian exports. They have not fallen in line with the Western sanctions on them. You take a look at India, for example, since February till today, India has increased its intake of Russian oil 21 times. So if we did 44,000 barrels or so in February or before February, today we do about 960,000 barrels of Russian oil. Russia is India's #1 source for this month of oil. It's a quarter of India's imports. Pakistan and Sri Lanka have done more or less the same. We understand until the Russian foreign minister actually called off his visit to Dhaka later this week, he was expected to come and speak about Bangladesh too, taking in Russian oil. But we all know that this is going to come to an end if the sanctions tighten. The second place where we've seen that physical impact is on food and fertilizer prices. They have gone up. Food inflation is rising across our countries. Increased insecurity in Europe is going to be a problem for us. If there is more of the war clouds gathering over Europe, our students, our immigrants, our workers are going to be affected more and more as the war goes on. The second big impact, and again, I don't think we think about this. Remember, 140 countries in the UNGA actually voted to criticize Russia's actions in Ukraine. But when it came to the sanctions by the West, only 40 countries are part of that, or less than 40 countries are part of those sanctions. What does this mean? It means that there's 160 countries out there that are seeking to bifurcate, perhaps, what the economic systems are going to mean. Over time, and of course, both in Bangladesh and in India, we have seen the impact of very, targeted sanctions by the United States in the last year. In Bangladesh, it was over the Magnitsky Act. In India, it has been over importers of Iranian oil, Iran also under sanctions. More and more discussions in the region are about payment mechanisms being separated. So you might have national currencies being used more and more, as a result of which we could see what is being called, and I think it's a bit premature right now, but the de-dollarization of the global economy. This is going to be something South Asia is going to have to deal with. And finally, there will be a weakening of WTO mechanisms as a result of what we're seeing as the impact of the war in Ukraine. The third big challenge, and I think every South Asian country already feels it, Bangladesh is seeing it a little, Sri Lanka sees it, Nepal is seeing it, is that our region, where we should have the largest vote, is increasingly becoming a place of US-China contestation. There is a competition, but it is an unhealthy competition because it seeks to cut out the other entirely from projects We're seeing a greater securitization, if you like, military pacts with one side or the other, more exercises, military exercises, and more divisions over this particular contestation. I think South Asia needs to think very closely about allowing this contestation to take over what should be our voice in our region. And finally, the fourth point here, I think, is that we are likely to see an end of multilateral forums, an end of globalization, and possibly an end of the United Nations. I know this sounds extremely dire, particularly at a time when, if you go to international conferences, actually people are talking much more about multilateralism. But what we are seeing instead is a fragmented world. It will become much more about might is right. It will become about the fact that the United Nations was first helpless when it came to COVID, helpless when it came to helping the countries worst hit, and helpless in holding the country where it originated from much more to account. Another thing that's going away is globalization. It is becoming a bad word. If you look around you, countries are seeing globalization as one of the reasons why COVID was such a problem. They are seeing the supply chains that were globalized as another big problem. Where is this going to lead? Obviously, each of us is not going to be one economy for themselves. It's leading to more and more focus on regionalization. What are the regional groupings that are already doing very well? I don't need to tell you. There's the European Union. In South America, there's Mercosur. The US, even in its most protectionist times, has been able to work through the USMCA with Mexico and China. The Gulf has its own. Eurasia has its own. RCEP has all the countries, 15 countries to the east of us, in one economic cooperation pact. Where does that leave an area like South Asia? SAARC has obviously failed us. The South Asian Preferential Trade Agreement does not seem to hold much water. SAFTA, Free Trade Agreement. When it comes to transit, we don't have that either. BIMSTEC has not yet made any ground, not covered ground on trade as much. And BBIN, while it has led to, say, a Bangladesh-Bhutan trade agreement or a Nepal and Bangladesh trade agreement, is still mired in the same problems. The Motor Vehicle Acts, for example, does not extend even to the 4 BBIN countries. So I would just like to end this by saying, our part of the world, South Asia, is today making a lot less sense than it ever did before. While the logic of South Asia, one geographical unit bounded by the Himalayas and other mountains to the north, bounded by the oceans to the south, that geographical logic remains. Actually, politically, we have very little logic at work. The fact that we allow bilateral differences between states, whether it is India and Pakistan, whether it is Bangladesh and Myanmar to the east, we allow those differences to hold up regionalization, that we still don't have transit trade through the region. And remember, this is actually going backwards, because we did in the past, in the old times, have transit trade through the region. All trades are disused. There are students go elsewhere to study. There are tourists go elsewhere to travel, and many of our patients go elsewhere to seek medical help. There are supply chains lead outside our region when there are so many resources, and the need for markets within South Asia. Intra-regional trade, less than 5%, I think, this year, while others, those other regional groupings I mentioned, have 55% of their trade within their own region, that we don't have a common platform. And we saw this at COP27 as well, that we don't have a common platform on climate change and reparations. We don't have a common platform on healthcare, on labor rights, and remittances, which every South Asian country knows the value of. These are all reasons why I say we're making less and less sense in South Asia when you look at the global landscape, particularly after Ukraine. This morning, the former president of Serbia, Mr. Tadic, said, states are behaving more and more like humans. I would only add to that, in South Asia, we are at present behaving like humans that put their petty differences above and their rivalries over really what their head and their heart should tell them. Thanks very much.